Hello and welcome to this online presentation, Blessed Michael McGivney, Model for 21st Century Priests. On behalf of the Blessed Michael McGivney Pilgrimage Center in New Haven, Connecticut, thank you for your interest as we continue to examine the life and legacy of Father Michael McGivney, parish priest and founder of the Knights of Columbus. In this session, we will continue to shift the focus that began last month from a historical or biographical focus on Father McGivney's life and ministry to a look at modern devotion to him. Today is June 2nd, 2021, and this presentation is being recorded. It will be available for viewing on demand on the McGivney Center's YouTube account as well as its Facebook page. Links to these sites are on the resource sheet, which are available for download via the utility on the right side of your screen. You're welcome as well to submit questions throughout. There is a tab on the utility for questions to be submitted. I expect this session will last about 45 minutes. And joining me today, as you see, is Sulpician Father Phillip Brown. Father Brown has been president and rector of St. Marys Seminary and University in Baltimore since 2016. He is an experienced professor and administrator, having taught previously at the Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C., and he served as well as rector at Theological College, which is the seminary attached to CUA. I know from our past conversations, Father, that you hail from the beautiful state of North Dakota, and that before entering the academic realm, you were very active in pastoral ministry. You were a high school chaplain and also involved in diocesan administration there. I want to tell our audience that Father Brown is both a civil and a canon lawyer, and he also has previously served as president of the Canon Law Society of America. Father Brown, God bless you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you very much, Peter. And I just want to thank you for inviting me to take part in this webinar today. And I also want to say a word of welcome to all of our guests who are joining us online through the miracle of now all of the fabulous electronic media that we have. And before we get into the questions, I just want to something I perhaps mention again later. But the Knights of Columbus have always been very close to my heart since I was a child. My father was a very active member of the Knights of Columbus, and in fact, he was the state master in North Dakota for several years. And so I grew up with the Knights. I'm a Knight myself, 4th degree, and we'll talk a little bit about the new chapter at St. Mary's, but I was just delighted when that developed very recently, and we were able to establish our own council here, because I know just the tremendous contribution that members of the Knights of Columbus make to Catholic life in the United States and throughout the world. And I would say they're really, really foundational to the presence of the Catholic Church in our country and our world. So thank you so much for inviting me. It's a real honor to be able to
You're
speak.
extremely welcome, and I thank you, because St. Mary's Seminary in Baltimore is where Father McGivney finished his preparation for priesthood, his theology, if you will. We'd call it, I guess, major seminary in the parlance of today. It was the preeminent Catholic seminary in the United States at the time, and has continued to maintain its prestige for many, many years. So we're grateful for your taking time to share with us today the joy that the seminary experienced at the beatification of its former alumnus. But let's look at Father McGivney. The focus of today's talk really is about Father McGivney as an example for priests of this era. He lived, as we all know, until 1890, and it was a much different world than it is today. But I think that his example of pastoral leadership is somewhat timeless. So what did that beatification mean for you, Father, personally, as well as for the community at St. Mary's?
Well, certainly personally, it meant a great deal to me because of my own experience with the Knights and being a Knight, and the love for the Knights of Columbus that I've had throughout my life. But for St. Mary's Seminary and University, we're just extremely proud to be able to claim Blessed Michael McGivney as an alumnus of this great seminary and university. In the early stages of Father McGivney's vocation, Blessed Michael actually wanted to be a scholar and to serve God through the use of and development of his intellect. But it was at St. Mary's Seminary that he got in touch with his profound pastoral heart, recognizing an even deeper vocation to serve the church and the people of God as a parish priest, rather than through scholarship. And what an outstanding example of a parish priest he became. His zeal for pastoral ministry was inspired and cultivated by his experience as a seminarian at St. Mary's, the nation's first Roman Catholic seminary. This passion for pastoral ministry was and continues to be part and parcel of the Sulpician approach to priestly formation, which began in France in the 17th century when the Society of Saint-Sulpice was founded in Paris by Father Jean-Jacques Ollier, and continues right up to today in the kind of priestly formation we impart at St. Mary's. Sulpician formation is grounded in a dedication to pastors forming future pastors, and on being in touch with the needs and circumstances of the times in which we live. That is what Father McGivney was known for, understanding his time and circumstances and being totally committed to his immigrant parish community of St. Mary's in New Haven, Connecticut.
Father, I have a wonderful video clip that I hope you'll permit me to share. Some of the seminarians who just before the end of this year's spring semester completed a video, and they made it public on the occasion of Good Shepherd Sunday, which is the day that we as Catholics pray for vocations in the church. And these are all young men that are in formation at St. Mary's. If you'll permit me, I am going to share that video with our audience.
This is the priest we long for. This is the priest the church needs today.
I'm inspired by Blessed McGivney's ability to see the strengths in his parishioners and to give them opportunities to serve Christ in the church.
He inspires me because of the care he has for his parishioners, looking after both their corporeal and spiritual needs.
His simplicity in priesthood inspires me.
We're here at St. Mary's Chapel at St. Mary's Seminary on Paca Street in Baltimore, Maryland. And this is where Blessed Michael McGivney prayed and studied from September 14th, 1873 until he was ordained a priest on December 22nd, 1877.
I've just found it extremely interesting to be at this site on Paca Street and to think about how Blessed Michael McGivney prayed here and thought about the culture of his time and how to be a great pastor. And it was here at this seminary where Blessed Michael McGivney was formed into being a strong pastor and also a remarkable human being, ready and prepared with the leadership skills to found the Knights of Columbus. And this is the challenge that we've accepted as seminarians, to look to Blessed Michael McGivney, his virtue and his holiness, and to look to our own lives and strive to live in a manner like him.
At the time of Blessed Michael McGivney's death, there were less than 6,000 members of the Knights of Columbus, and there were only a handful of councils outside of his native state of Connecticut. Now, in the year 2021, there are over 2 million Knights of Columbus throughout the world, in the US, Canada, the Philippines, Mexico, the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, Panama, Poland, and other nations.
As I look at this seminary chapel on Paca Street, I can't help but wonder what Blessed Michael McGivney and his fellow seminarians at the time were thinking about. Of course, they were preparing to study and serve as pastors in the United States during the time of the Industrial Revolution, as most Catholics at the time were poor, working-class immigrants, and they were preparing to serve those people. And now it's 2021, of course, the COVID-19 crisis, and I, along with the other seminarians here today, also have a lot to think about, prepare for, and we look to Blessed McGivney.
Well, Father, I can't help but be impressed at how much these seminarians identify with Father McGivney, even as I said, this century beyond his time there. He was a fellow student for priestly ministry, and till today, they seem to have great admiration for the fact that he studied on in the same Sulpician method that you share today.
Well, I don't think it's any exaggeration, Peter, to say that Father McGivney is an exemplar par excellence of what we're aiming at St. Mary's today, and we're aiming at St. Mary's over 100 years ago. What our Sulpician formation method has really been aiming for since the founding of the society in 1641 by Father Ollier. And that is nothing more, nothing less than to provide the people of God with the kind of priests they truly deserve. Good pastoral priests with pastoral zeal, pastoral hearts, whose whole lives are devoted to others and meeting their needs and supporting them, and not any other objective than that. The St. Mary's Seminary and University was founded in 1791 in Baltimore and is the birthplace of priestly formation in the United States as the nation's first Roman Catholic seminary. At the invitation of Bishop John Carroll, America's first Catholic bishop, Father Francois Nagot and several Sulpician priests and seminarians came to Baltimore and began priestly formation here on October 3rd, 1791, leaving the ravages of the French Revolution and its persecution of the church and Catholics, including Sulpician priests, behind. So what is Sulpician formation all about? Well, the idea of 4 dimensions of priestly formation, human, spiritual, intellectual, and pastoral, is commonplace today. But thinking of it in that way really began in the Sulpician seminaries. It was through the influence of Sulpician seminaries that these concepts have made their way into priestly formation in general today. This aim at a holistic formation of priests rather than simply an academic program and prayers in the chapel, but a development of the whole person so that the intellectual life and the spirituality of the priest and the pastoral zeal will be undergirded by a very strong human formation. We take the human reality of the seminarian and priests very, very seriously, relying upon that wonderful insight of St. Thomas Aquinas that really builds on St. Paul, that grace builds upon nature. But you have to have nature first. You have to have a strong basis in the human person and the natural qualities of the person in order for grace to really reach its fruition in selflessness and strong ministry for others. So St. Mary's primary purpose is to provide this outstanding human, spiritual, intellectual, and pastoral formation for candidates for the Roman Catholic priesthood, and in particular, to prepare them to serve as parish priests. Many other seminaries pride themselves on the number of alumni who become bishops. St. Mary's ideal is to produce the very finest parish priests possible, because that's where the life of the church really is, in the parish. And the greatest impact that any ordained person has on the faithful is in the daily life of the parish. The key idea of our founder, Father Ollier, that continues today is that of the formation community, or what he referred to as the communauté éducatrice, which promotes communion with Jesus Christ and with other members of the community. At its center, that recognizes that formation isn't something that just happens in the classroom or in the chapel, but it happens in the life of the seminary community. So everyone who's a part of the community has an impact on the formation of everyone else, and should be very intentional. So as a faculty, we look at the life of the community very carefully and say, how can we shape the life of the community to really shape and support strong formation? And towards that end, it has always been a feature of Sulpician seminaries that the priest faculty are required to live at the seminary. That hasn't always been the case. It's really fairly recently. In the past, priests would come and teach their courses and go home at night, would come and give spiritual direction, go home to a parish or somewhere else. But our model is based upon the principle that as important as what happens in the classroom and the chapel is the modeling of good, holy, virtuous, strong priests. And that more casual influence that has towards really showing a man what it means to be a priest and how to be a good priest on a day-to-day basis. So it's really an act of companionship, not just teaching, that is a part of our tradition. And so we're required to live at the seminary. In fact, it's always been a part of our seminaries that faculty live on the corridors with the seminarians in order to exercise that influence. And this is one of the reasons that St. Mary's had such a profound influence on Blessed Michael McGivney towards living up to the ideal of parish priesthood that he exemplified so well. As Father Joseph Daly, who knew Father McGivney and his family well, who is quoted in Brinkley and Fenster's biography of Michael McGivney, said, the Sulpicians at St. Mary's taught McGivney to regard scholarship as a subsidiary quality in a priest. Humanity, not the humanities, should engage his devoted study. Sympathy for human woes being more intrinsic than knowledge. To store up knowledge is good, they admitted, but to save souls is incomparably better. So St. Mary's continues to affirm the irreplaceable importance of personal presence and encounter and effective witness to those in formation. Again, not only in the classroom or the chapel, but in everyday life.
Clearly, the influence was felt, and Father McGivney had a true affection for his alma mater at St. Mary's. In past presentations, Father Brown, one of the things that has come up is that in McGivney's era, now he's in formation during the 1870s, it's post-Civil War era, the church is still, in the United States at least, very much a mission church. And there's a mission character to the church in the United States again today. Are there comparisons that we can make about the needs of the church in McGivney's era as well as our own?
Well, I think very much so. I would say, first of all, society in general today has become much more secularized than it was in McGivney's time. For Father McGivney, the challenge was more how to respond to the religious tensions that existed between Catholics and Protestants and outright discrimination against Catholics, especially Catholic immigrants, in a predominantly Protestant America that still showed the tone that was set by the nativists and the know-nothings of the 1840s and 1850s. Today, Catholics and Protestants in general get along much better than in the 19th century, but society as a whole has shifted away from religious affiliation to an alarming extent. Thus, America is in fact mission territory in a very real sense today, in need of evangelization of the unchurched and those who have never had a religious affiliation, but also re-evangelization of Catholics and others who may have had a religious upbringing, but often only superficially, and therefore whose religiosity is not deeply rooted and is often shaped more by the secularized culture around them than by authentic Christian faith. We have seen a resort by the church today to outside resources In the many international seminarians, that is, seminarians from other countries and cultures, that the church has turned to fill the ranks of the diocesan clergy. St. Mary's, for instance, almost 1/3 of our seminarians are internationals, predominantly from South America and Africa, but also from Vietnam and even China. Similarly to McGivney's time, and in fact to the entire history of the church. A particular advantage that we have is the gospel story itself, the narrative of Christian faith, both in the life of Jesus and the disciples, but also in the lives of the saints throughout the history of the church. The Christian story is an incredibly compelling narrative. More than ever, people are captivated by stories, by a compelling narrative. Priests need to rediscover the power of being good storytellers, especially in their preaching. This is the most effective way we are going to reach people today. And just like the narrative of Blessed Father Michael McGivney, what a remarkable story of a man who was attracted to scholarship, who eventually developed a passion for being with the people, for sharing their sufferings and supporting them, ministering, even dying for them out of love for them, very much like the story of Christ himself, modeled in the life of Michael McGivney, who modeled his life on the life of Christ. McGivney lived the story of Christ in his own life, and people recognized that, and it attracted them to the deep commitment to Christ and their faith that he exemplified, just as it does today, I have to say, in very important ways among the members of the Knights of Columbus.
Father, let me take a step even farther back and ask about the needs for vocations. Plainly, in McGivney's era, there was great need. Many of the young men in formation were not even American born at that time. But today, it's often said that there is a vocations crisis in the church and in particularly in the United States. As someone who's been involved in priestly formation now for many years, what is your view of the need for vocations in the church today?
Well, that's a question, Peter, I've thought about a lot from the day I was ordained throughout my experience as a pastor and, of course, my work as a seminary formator and rector. And I would say that there is a vocations crisis today, but the crisis is not that there are not vocations. The priesthood, for those who live it authentically, leads to an unbelievably rich and fulfilling life. It's important for priests to maintain their perspective on the importance and richness of what we do, because as human beings, it's important to know that what you do is meaningful and important. But just think of how rewarding it is to know that you are lifting burdens from other people and helping them discover the meaning of their own lives, even in the midst of trials, tragedies, and difficulty. There is great nobility in the priesthood because there is great nobility in the lives people live against difficult odds. No one should ever underestimate how courageous people are just in living their lives the best way they can, and how noble the priesthood is, providing people with the support they need to do so. So let me get to the point. I believe there are many vocations out there today, but I also believe many are deterred from acting on their true vocation because of lack of support from others, because of ambiguity and lack of clarity that has been created regarding what the priesthood is and what the requirements of priesthood are, because of the negative image of priesthood that has been created as a result of the clerical sexual abuse scandals. Even though the vast majority of priests are good men who have been living their lives and providing ministry faithfully. I can't think myself of a greater tragedy than a person never fulfilling his or her true vocation. But many are deterred today from acting on their true vocation by all of these influences. That's why it's so important for family members and Catholics in general to support and encourage those who believe they might have a religious vocation or who they themselves think might be a good priest. Not so much because the church needs priests. That's not the principal reason for promoting vocations. The principal reason is because becoming a priest is where they will find their true happiness and their greatest happiness if they have a true vocation. And isn't that, in the end, what parents want the most for their children? Not necessarily that they will get married and have children or become a lawyer or a doctor or become wealthy, but that they will find happiness, that they will have happy and fulfilling lives. And isn't that what we should want for everyone? So there's much to be said about, this vocation crisis today, but authentic vocations are more often than not inspired by relationships with good priests, those who model authentic priesthood. Young people have less and less contact with priests today, so they may be deprived of an important source for discerning a priestly vocation. I think that's one of the worst things about this evil that has happened in the church, that has given the priesthood a bad image so that people keep their distance from priests. How are young people going to know the beauty of the priesthood if they never have a relationship with a priest? And as a result of much of this, many seminarians that I see today have an abstract idea of what it means to be a priest, but they have not experienced a true, strong model of priesthood. This can set them up for discouragement and disappointment because reality never matches our abstract ideals. But when we embrace reality as it really is, with all of its struggles and weaknesses, it is so much richer than our imaginary ideals or trying to live up to an impossible perfection. Real human beings who are priests, not perfect priests, but priests who are good men with good hearts, in spite of their own human struggles, but especially who love people and treat people right and respect their relationships with others, so that they could never do anything that would harm another person, but only those things that support and help others to deal with the challenges of their own lives and to live virtuously themselves. That's what Blessed Father Michael McGivney was, and what Blessed Father Michael McGivney did.
These are excellent insights, Father. We often hear, as I said at the outset, that we have this crisis, but we don't often consider the points that you've just made. And I think it's very valuable for the faithful to keep those thoughts in mind. And everything you said makes perfect sense and helps offer some explanation, at least, as to why there may be this shortage that exists today. Let me go a further step and ask about the men that are in formation today, the 21st century priests, so to speak. What is it that distinguishes them? What essential qualities are there, or characteristics that you see in these men that God is calling to serve the church in this era?
Well, I love the videos that you made reference to, and you showed an excerpt from one, and I know you have another one I think that you're going to show later. And I think they really, really demonstrate the kind of young men that are coming to the seminary today who are a real inspiration. The first and foremost quality is to have those human qualities that are necessary to be a man for others: true empathy, true sympathy for the situation of other people, an outgoing, engaging manner, even if you're an introvert, but learning how to really engage people and live with them. Because I have a very strong feeling that the priest of tomorrow needs to be what I refer to as an animating presence, someone who brings a spark into the room, into the lives of the people that he serves, that draws out their own gifts, that empowers them to be ministers of the gospel. And so priests who are an engaged participant in the community, not someone who sits above the community, or gives commands to people or governs the community, but rather one who guides others and glories in the success of others and leads and guides them with a light touch. Or perhaps you might think of it as being like a gardener who prunes away the things that threaten or impede growth, but who allows the plant he tends to grow and gain strength and flourish on its own. So again, the next most important quality is pastoral zeal, but zeal that's tempered by an ability to read situations and people in order to give them what they need, and just enough of what they need, oriented not towards his own needs or what he thinks people need, but discerning what people really need. To be a good priest, priests must also be men of curiosity about the spiritual as well as the other dimensions of human existence. But these are human qualities, and that's why, again, we place such emphasis on human formation. Again, as St. Thomas said, grace builds on nature. I will repeat this. Priests of today must be men of compassion and empathy, just as Father McGivney evidenced to the immigrant community that he served. Men who are preoccupied with the struggles, anxieties, sorrows, and also the joys of others. Men who are not self-centered, God forbid narcissistic, but men who are truly giving and out there to support and help other people grow. Also men who are in pursuit of holiness and who by their example are able to lead others to holiness.
Father, you cited the video that I showed earlier, and that I have another one prepared, and I think this is a very opportune time to show it, because I think it's going to give an example of so many of those qualities that you just shared. If you'll allow me to pause and show that video.
I think the first time I started to think about the priesthood was around 4th grade. I had a really great pastor growing up, and it was around the time of my first communion that I started to altar serve, and that parishioners in the parish would sometimes come up to me and suggest thinking about the priesthood. You know, some little Italian ladies in the parish, they'd look up at me because they were shorter than me, and they would say, "CJ, we think you'd be a good priest. Why don't you think about it?" And I would sort of put it on the back burner for a little bit. But the thought of the priesthood was always a constant. As I grew up, as I went through middle school and high school, I thought about other things I might do, other ways I might serve the church, and there was this persistent thought of the priesthood that I kept coming back to. And so finally, around my maybe junior year of college, I reconnected with our vocation director again, and he set me on the process really to begin application for the seminary. When I told my family earlier this year that I had been accepted to the seminary, I don't think they were altogether surprised, but they were, of course, excited, elated. They were so pleased to hear that I was finally going through with this decision. For 8.5 years, I've had the privilege to serve as a volunteer firefighter back home for our village just outside of Buffalo. I see a lot of parallels between the fire service and the priesthood. As a firefighter, it's my privilege to be able to enter into people's suffering with them. So when we get a call, whether it be at dinner time, in the middle of the night, middle of the day, we go because people need us. They don't call us when they're having a good day, but they call us when they're having a bad day. And so whether it's a fire, whether it's a call for burnt food, whether it's a call for a car accident or a cat stuck in a tree, we unconditionally serve. We enter into that suffering with people, and we serve them no matter what their need is, no matter who they are, where they're from. We try to be that salvation that they need in that moment. When I first started telling people that I was going to seminary, of course we had conversations about it. People wondered, why am I going into this? Why now? And for me, I see this as the best way that I can serve the church, being someone who can listen to them and enter into their suffering with them, someone who can just be a friend, someone who can be a guy that they can have a bite to eat with or go play golf with, and someone who can share that love of the gospel with them.
Father, while you were talking before the video, I was making some notes of some of the qualities you were citing. Curiosity, I wrote down, empathy, compassion, zeal, unity or concern for the faithful. And we saw all of those exemplified in that short clip.
Yeah.
What a wonderful example of a young man and how he discerned his vocation as well. It was not something that he was decided on. He knew there was a call within. He admitted as much very early on, and people encouraged him, as you cited, throughout his life. But it took some time and it took some prayerful consideration before he realized it and embraced it. And so happy that he's at St. Mary's and receiving the formation from the Sulpicians that you've cited several times.
Well, you might think that we chose our most extraordinary seminarian to make that video, but I'm happy to be able to tell you that CJ is a typical seminarian of the seminarians we have today. It's very important that we attract those kinds of young men and that we maintain not an impossibly high, but a high standard, because the more men you have who are well-formed humanly, the more they attract and the healthier the community is. But if you are not willing to make the hard decisions and really not judge people, but judge their qualities to be able to be effective priests and make the right decisions, well, then you're really going to weaken the priesthood. So I think one of the things we're trying to do is really be very conscious of that. Yeah.
Father, I want to ask you something else about a possible familiarity with McGivney's era and our era. As we noted before, Father McGivney was born of immigrant parents. His parents had come to the United States during the potato famine in the mid-19th century. He was born here, baptized here, but his parents had been born and raised in Ireland. Today, there are a number of immigrants in the United States, and I wonder if the experiences that McGivney faced, and you cited some of them earlier on, some of the hardships and the rejection that immigrants faced during his era, caused him to have more of a sensitivity or even a predilection for immigrants and those on society's margins, which I think is manifest in the Knights of Columbus. How does that example or that focus translate to seminarians for today?
I think it's extremely relevant for today. America is living through a new era of immigration and a new era of prejudice and discrimination against immigrants. I've been extremely disturbed by the rhetoric of the past 40 years or so that has often been quite hostile toward immigrants, even at times coming from public officials who themselves are Catholics. Whatever the issues may be with respect to legal or illegal entry into the United States, most of those who come to the US are coming because of the promise the United States has always held out to immigrants for a better life. But immigrants still very often experience prejudice and discrimination, just as in the times of Father McGivney. Priests are called to serve human beings, especially those who are in any kind of need, and regardless of what has brought about their difficult circumstances, without questioning the circumstances other than what their needs are and how the priest can serve, support, encourage, and help stabilize their lives. Thus, this is a very current issue, and one with respect to which priests can and should look to the positive example of Father McGivney. He stood by the immigrants of his era and supported them, continually looking for positive ways to improve their circumstances. We know that the Knights of Columbus was motivated in very large part to provide insurance for families left destitute when the breadwinner, when that day invariably would have been the father, died prematurely. And because of the desperate circumstances it left them in. So that's what the priests and seminarians of today should be doing, regardless of how daunting the task may be. And we should not forget that today's immigrants, especially those trying to escape harsh conditions in their country of origin continue to be coming from overwhelmingly Catholic countries, whatever the state of their own faith. But we also know that many, if not most of those immigrants of today have a fervent devotion to Catholic faith. So certainly priests and seminarians should be going out to them and ministering to them, especially with the sacraments, but also evangelizing them where their faith is not deeply rooted, in order to demonstrate that what the church has taught them in the cultures that they come from is true and will be fulfilled by faithful ministers and the Catholic community in general.
Father, the photo that we've been looking at in the slides for a few minutes is a photo that was taken when an exemplification recently happened at St. Mary's. And, you know, Father McGivney formed the Knights of Columbus and established councils predominantly in a parish setting. He wanted to unite men in faith and in charitable apostolate, but in modern times, they have become popular on college settings. And here's the case at St. Mary's. We've got a group of young men studying for the priesthood who have decided that they wanted to form a council. They wanted to unite in that particular way, both in faith as well as in outreach to the needy. Tell me a little bit about the origins of the council at St. Mary's.
Well, I was simply delighted when the local knights approached me about the possibility of starting a council here at St. Mary's. And I was deeply gratified when it turned out that over 30 members signed up to form the council from the seminary community. As I mentioned, the Knights of Columbus have been a part of my life my entire lifetime. I myself am a 4th degree knight, having joined as a member of the St. Wenceslaus chapter in Dickinson, North Dakota, when I was the pastor of St. Wenceslaus Church there. I long felt it would be a great boon for St. Mary's and, in fact, for the Knights to have our own council here at St. Mary's Seminary University, in particular because the founder, Blessed Father Michael McGivney, was an alumnus of St. Mary's. So I'm very proud that we now have our own council at St. Mary's, and suffice it to say, I believe Blessed Michael McGivney would be very proud of it too. It's a wonderful tribute to him and a clear acknowledgement of how he is regarded by present-day seminarians and faculty members. 34 members, including seminarians and priests, joined at St. Mary's, some, like myself, transferring their membership from other councils, and others joining at the meeting. The name of our council is the Blessed Michael McGivney Council at St. Mary's Seminary. The Grand Knight is Michael Schultz, a seminarian from the Archdiocese of Louisville, Kentucky. The Knights espouse values and virtues that I believe are very important for seminarians today, and in fact, very important for men in our society today. Certainly, of course, for Catholic men. Values and virtues of loyalty, fidelity, steadfastness, responsibility, especially care for our families, and indeed devotion to one's country, patriotism in the most positive sense of the word, and of course, service to one's community, to the church, and in particular, service to those in need. The main causes of the Knights of Columbus, the causes that the Knights promote, are causes that I would like to see every seminarian and every priest devoted to. So having our own council really helps us at the seminary to do a better job of what we do, to do better what we are all about, to form good, holy, healthy, happy priests to serve the people of God, to give the church and the people of God the kind of priests they truly deserve.
Father Brown, the seminary, as we noted at the outset, is in Baltimore. Baltimore was home to Catholicism. It was the first diocese or see established in the U.S., and the seminary was established there naturally as the logical place to form priests. The fellows who we saw on the video at the the earlier occasion were on the site that McGivney studied. It's a little more downtown. More recently, the facility is moved to another part of the city. The photo that we're looking at today is the modern school that you're at. Remind us, please, where the men who are studying for the priesthood today at St. Mary's come from, and what's the number of fellows that are in formation there?
Well, we have, I think we have about 73. We were just going over the numbers today. We're looking like we're going to have 82 starting in the fall. This year they come from, I don't recall exactly now, 13 or 15 different dioceses. So we're very highly represented in the state of Pennsylvania and New York. Certainly we have a lot of seminarians from Baltimore, and we also have seminarians from Louisville, Kentucky. Over the course of St. Mary's history, we've had a lot of seminarians from not the deep south, but the near south, but also the deep south, reaching out further into the Midwest. So we cover a lot of territory. We'd like to cover a lot more. Our aim is to, we will have reached our preliminary goal without getting into any of the technicalities, but at 80 seminarians, we think what is the right number. Both financially, it works out very well for the seminary. We'd like to get to 100, but we're in very good shape with 80. We renovated for 100. Now, this is a seminary that in 1973, I think, the seminary's capacity was 350, and they had almost 450 seminarians in the 70s. Well, we all know what happened from the 70s to the 80s to the 90s. Vocations sort of collapsed across the country. And so when we looked at renovating to upgrade our facility to a more modern seminary, to take it from being a 1920s dormitory, you know, for seminarians whose average age was 22 or 24, to a modern facility for many men who have come, who have been out in the professional world. And so we have created much more comfortable, though not luxurious, seminary quarters, what we think is well suited to young men of today. As a matter of human formation, because it's my conviction that in order to flourish in studies and formation, you can't be making jokes about the place you live or putting up with a lot of inconveniences. It should be convenient and comfortable enough to be able to focus on your studies and your formation, not extraneous issues. So we reduced the size of the seminary. We took 2 rooms and put them together as 1 room to add also personal facilities and living quarters, both for that human formation. But many seminary rectors are surprised when I tell them that we've limited intentionally our capacity, because you know they tend to want as many seminaries that they can get. But because of the personal attention that we give to seminarians today, we feel we could not do nearly as good a job if we had too many seminarians and not enough faculty. So in looking back and reflecting upon the work that we do, we think between 80 and 100 is about the sweet spot to be able to do a really good job of seminary formation and not let guys get lost in the crowd and really not necessarily know what's going on with them or be able to tend to all of them. And so that's sort of an idea of what our size is, where we come from, what our vision of seminary is today. I'd love to be able to have 120 applicants and say, you know, we can't take all of you, but we know there's this good seminary up in New York State. There's another great seminary in Maryland. There's a great seminary in, you know, Indiana, Chicago, and other places. So we'll take the cream of the crop and we'll spread the other ones around. No, I'm being a little bit joking about it. But the main focus here is we want to be able to do the best job possible. So we don't want to be like, you know, fast food franchises and other businesses that extend beyond their reach and then don't do a good job, but rather we're satisfied. We don't need to be the biggest seminary that serves the United States. We just aim to be the best.
Well, and I'm happy to know that you're approaching your optimal level, and very happy for the diocese and the faithful in those dioceses that have men in formation there. Father, thank you for your generosity. Thank you for spending some time with us, and thank you for having such a great affection for the former alum that we mentioned, Father McGivney, and making him a model to the men that are in formation there and to others, just so that they know the type of priest that has been formed from St. Mary's and the Sulpician model there, and how valuable his example is still to the modern day in the church. I want to thank our audience for their attention, and share that this is the last planned session that we have until the end of summer. So please continue to follow our website and our social media channels, and we'll share with you any developments and new events. Father, it's our custom before we close to pray the prayer for Father McGivney's canonization, and I want to ask you to do so if you're willing. I'll put the prayer on the screen for you.
Be a great honor. Thank you, and thank you for inviting me again, and thank you to all of you who tuned in today. This has been a real pleasurable experience to be able to chat with you.
Can you see the prayer on your screen, Father?
I cannot.
Okay.
I have to do something.
Well, in that case, if you'll permit me, I'd like to lead the prayer then and ask you to follow along. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. God, our Father, protector of the poor and defender of the widow and orphan, you called your priest, Blessed Michael McGivney, to be an apostle of Christian family life and to lead the young to the generous service of their neighbor. Through the example of his life and virtue, may we follow your Son, Jesus Christ, more closely, fulfilling his commandment of charity and building up his body, which is the church. Let the inspiration of your servant prompt us to greater confidence in your love, so that we may continue his work of caring for the needy and the outcast. We humbly ask that you glorify Blessed Michael McGivney on earth, according to the design of your holy will. Through his intercession, grant the favors we now present. Through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. God bless you, Father Brown. Thank you. I hope you have a restful summer, and I look forward to an opportunity to hear more good developments out of St. Mary's Seminary in Baltimore.
Thank you very much. And we're all praying for that next miracle.
Indeed. Thank you. God bless. And to everyone, until we meet again, may you be healthy and have a restful summer.